Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Now, we are going to continue to pay homage to National Stress Awareness Month by recommending another set of comedic films. We are definitely leaning into the idea that laughter is the best kind of medicine, and while last week we focused on romantic comedy classics, we are this week going to shift our focus and recommend two really fantastic, scarily funny comedic horror films, one of which happens to be one of my favorite films of all time. As always, if you have a Milan-Berlin library card, you have access to thousands and thousands of comedies, not just the ones we recommend here. So if you are in desperate need of a laugh, you can 100% find something with one of our services. And as always, all of the films recommended via this channel are available with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card, either through CLEVNET on DVD or Blu-ray, or through our digital media services. So without any further ado, let's get to the recs. Okay, so my first recommendation is available on DVD via our CLEVNET service, and that is 1986's Little Shop of Horrors. I mentioned in the intro that one of my favorite films of all time was going to be mentioned today. This is it. This came out when I was 4 years old. I watched it as a 4-year-old, loved it then, am 41 now, rewatched it for this week, still absolutely adore this movie. So basic overview. Little Shop of Horrors is based on a 1982 off-Broadway musical, which in turn was based off of a 1960s Roger Corman dark comedy horror film. If you aren't familiar with Roger Corman, you should definitely check out some of his movies. He's sort of this cult favorite director, very much has a particular style, and the original Little Shop of Horrors, which was not a musical, by the by, 100% leaned into that, his aesthetic, and it's an excellent sort of cult favorite film. Anyway, Little Shop of Horrors follows this rather hapless florist clerk named Seymour. Seymour is the least assertive person ever. He's very quiet. He's very meek. He doesn't seem to have the capacity to push forward and to make himself and his voice heard. Now, he is absolutely in love with a fellow shop worker named Audrey, but he doesn't have the guts to say anything to her. They're just friends, and they're sweet, and it's really sweet, the interactions, but it's never going anywhere. Cue the discovery of a mystical plant that he names the Audrey too. Little does he know that this mystical plant is going to prompt the film title, Little Shop of Horrors. You can tell right away that it's some sort of variant of a Venus flytrap, maybe, and it's adorable. And I do have to say that most of the special effects in this are all practical, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing how well everything works. Most of it's done by puppetry, and just so cool. I still am so astonished when I watched it this last week, how smooth all of the physical transitions are with the puppetry, because Audrey 2, which starts out as a teeny tiny little plant, grows and continues to grow and is this, by the end of the film, a mammoth thing. And it's not a spoiler, it's like part of the plot description, how the plant grows into this giant greenery. Anyway, I think in part all of this puppetry is really so well done because the director is Frank Oz of Jim Henson fame. And I just can't say enough. Not super spoilery, but if anyone's a fan of The Mandalorian and has been watching this latest season, a lot of the movements of the puppet are done by practical effects with puppetry. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty of how the little Grogu character physically is moving, some of the principles are the same, but they're just not as well executed as in here. This is a movie that is like 35 and a half years old, and the puppetry, I think, is so strong in comparison when you look at certain things. Obviously, and I'm just talking on basic body movement, not like the face. Obviously, the face of Grogu is phenomenal, but yeah, if you ever watch behind the scenes things, it's really really incredible to see the disparity, even though one is decades older. Anyway, off topic for just a moment, and back to Little Shop of Horrors. We have this story of this really sweet meek guy starting to grow this plant, and he discovers pretty early on that the plant is carnivorous. it he's at first quite content. The plant is content to just sort of accept little blood drops from Seymour's hand. But as it grows larger, it demands a little bit more. And that's where things start to take a bit of a turn. Um, so you've got this plant that we know is carnivorous and that it grows. And it grows a lot every time it's fed. Things are the things that are established quite early on. Now you throw this sort of creeping dread and you mix it with some exceptional music. So the two men behind the music are Alan Menken and Howard Ashman. You might recognize those names from Disney fame. They were the the musical creators behind Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. They Aladdin. So some of the heydays of those like late 80s, early 90s Disney Renaissance films, that's their music. And the music in Little Shop is so good. It's very much steeped in the Motown doo-wop sort of vibe, and just so good. And it also plays with the whole Shakespearean concept of chorus. There are these three women who are essentially breaking the fourth wall to bring us into the storyline, and they're like a trio of doo-wop singers, and all of their songs are amazing. And I've seen this production many times, both on film but then of course on stage. And when you have a really good chorus, those three characters, it makes the movie, it makes the experience. They're so key to the whole story. And the three women that they cast in Little Shop of Horrors are fantastic. One of whom is Tish Campbell from Martin fame. Anyway, Little Shop of Horrors has an exceptional soundtrack with great music. And the actors they cast are all solid singers. Some of them are actual stage performers. Ellen Green, who plays Audrey, essentially has played this role her whole life. She's so famous for it. She does it on stage in addition to being in this film, and she's fantastic at the character. But the film actors they got were really so shockingly so good at their roles, but also at singing. So Rick Moranis is Seymour, and is for me the ideal Seymour. He's so perfect, but he sings really well. And who would have known? If you watch like the SCTV stuff, he's not the guy that you would expect to have a really fantastic voice, and he does. But my favorite performance in this movie is from Steve Martin, who plays this rather sadistic dentist. He's epic in this, like acting wise, singing wise, dancing wise, absolutely epic. If you follow Steve Martin at all, you already know he's really great at musical performance, like the whole King Tut era of stand-up comedy that he did. Knows how to sell a song, but the song that he sings in here is just glorious. It really is. It's one of my favorite sequences of film, just in general. And randomly I'll be humming the tune in my head thinking this is not necessarily the song that you should randomly be humming, but it's stuck with me for decades and I still really enjoy it. So you've got Steve Martin, you've got phenomenal like cameo appearances. There's a cameo from John Candy. You've got cameos from Bill Murray, Christopher Guest from like Best in Show and Waiting for Guffman fame. It's just fantastic, and the whole cast together just works so well. Singing, acting, chemistry wise, Seymour and Audrey are just like phenomenal in every scene they're together. You root for them from the very get-go. and you love to hate Steve Martin's character. It's just exceptional. Um, so we've talked about exceptional cast, we've talked about the puppetry. Again, when I think about everything that they're able to do with practical effects, I am just so impressed. And the puppetry of all of the little moving bits and pieces, it's so so cool. If you love music, again, this duo of musical creators, they just have something together that just makes exceptional songs. It is a comedy, right? This is very very funny, but the songs are really good. Like, you've got like a love ballad that stands up to any love ballad. Certainly, not something you necessarily think, oh well, this is from a comedy show. uh this is, the music is just as vital as any other element within this. um and direction from Frank Oz. So I don't know that this film would have been so good with any other director, simply because Oz is so firmly steeped in understanding how puppetry works. You know, you can have a great musical director, but with this show in particular, if they don't know all the ins and outs of puppetry, I don't think it would have been as effective. You wouldn't necessarily know exactly how much a puppeteer is capable of and what you can do with it. Um, and since we're talking about puppetry, let's just talk for 1 second about Audrey 2. Audrey 2 is voiced by Levi Stubbs of Four Tops fame. As mentioned before, the music does have that strong Motown doo-wop vibe, and good grief, is he the absolute perfect casting for the carnivorous plant. Um, he has this really dark, deep voice that really does make this puppet plant impressive. It really is perfect. So, all those elements together, I absolutely recommend that you check this out. You don't have to be a huge musical fan to be able to appreciate all of the other elements of it, but if you are a musical fan and you haven't seen this before, 100% you need to. It's really ridiculously funny. As I said, even just the cameos that you get with John Candy, Belushi, you've got Bill Murray, Christopher Guest. Those are just cameos. And then the absolutely fantastic comedic performances from Steve Martin and Rick Moranis, as well as Ellen Green. If you're a performance person, it's another really key element of this. Phenomenal direction from Frank Oz, and just overall a really fantastic movie. Strongly recommended. Little Shop of Horrors available on DVD from our CLEVNET services. It is 100% a must watch. Okay, so my other recommendation for today is via our Canopy service and is 2010's Tucker and Dale versus Evil. This is such a good time to watch. It's the perfect film for fans of slasher horror films and the perfect film for fans of outrageous comedy. It's so interesting how well those two blend together in this movie, and it's something that I think fans of either genre can genuinely enjoy, even if you're not a fan of the opposing genre. You don't have to love comedy to love this movie. You don't have to love slasher films to love this movie. In fact, the slasher genre is probably my least favorite subgenre of horror. Like, honestly, I love horror films, but I almost never watch the slasher ones. I think this film is fantastic and so funny and so enjoyable. So, basic overview: Tucker and Dale are these two incredibly sweet hillbillies, and that's how they're described, who have finally managed to live the dream. They've purchased this dream cabin and you on the edge of the lake, and you discover that their dream cabin is just this sort of sad, dilapidated, terrifying looking structure that you would find in a horror film, that they're gonna fix up and make this great little home. And it's really cute, also absolutely horribly hilarious. And when you see the house, like, it's the perfect slasher cabin, right? Like, that's what you see. That's like, Evil Dead 2, that sort of like creepy, ominous looking structure in the middle of the woods, and it's perfect. And the fact that they love it and they're so excited. And aside from Tucker and Dale, you have this group of incredibly preppy, elite, uh, terribly annoying college kids who are going on vacation in a remote and terribly isolated backwoods area, like you do, except that's what happens in these movies. You're not going to Myrtle like every other college kid, you're going somewhere else, like you do. Anyway, uh, this clashing of these two groups is what makes this whole film. And the movie covers so many traditional tropes for slasher films like this, like with, again, the college kids going to this rando isolated area. Um, Tons of plot twists, the whole concept of like, you don't know who the real killer is, and then all of the reveals. That's pretty great. And tons of miscommunication and misunderstanding between the two groups, which is what leads in large part to many of the actually pretty horrific slasher deaths. Like, if you like that element of slasher films, if you like the really gruesome, awful demise part, this movie still manages to have it. It's just, it's going to also make you laugh while it happens, which is kind of terrible, but it's still a pretty solid blend of those two genres. The thing that I liked the most, though, is that I think that even if you don't like slasher horror films, you can like this film if you like really good, well done, and well performed comedy, especially that outrageous, over the top comedy. If you don't really like outrageous, over the top comedy and you really do love slasher films, I still think you can like this as well. So it feeds both, regardless of how you feel about that other combined genre, but still speaks to people who want to see both and the blend of both. It's just a really masterful, you know, combination of the two genres that I don't think you see often enough. Usually it'll lean more one way or the other. Like we were just talking about Little Shop of Horrors, and I definitely think that leans into the comedy. I don't necessarily think I had any jump scares, either as a small child or as an adult. This one has a couple of moments like that. It genuinely has some slasher style scares. And besides these misunderstandings, there's also the mystery. There are real murders going on. Not just like the terrifying, awful, gruesome accidents that are going on, but somebody is definitely a murderer in this story's universe. So you're definitely trying to figure out who is killing people that aren't just these sort of accidental murders. The other thing that I was super shocked by is there's also like a bizarrely sweet romantic subplot going on. I don't want to give too much away about that because, like I said, I definitely was like absolutely shocked that I was invested in it. I was definitely like, oh, rooting for it to work out. But yeah, that, so there's even that kind of element thrown in, and it is sweet and it's cute. It adds a level of heart that I 100% wasn't expecting, but absolutely appreciated. So if you like movies that do a lot of unexpected things, this is one that I definitely think will make you happy you chose to watch it. Whether you're a slasher fan, whether you're a comedy fan, whether you're a romance fan, that one a little bit less than the others, but still there. Or if you just like really well done film. Additionally, if you like well performed comedy, Alan Tudyk is glorious in this. Alan Tudyk is glorious in everything he does, whether we're talking about Wash in Firefly or the simply clucking character in Moana, because that was Tudyk as well. I don't really know how the script goes, like cluck wildly. But whether we're talking about those characters or characters like a sweet, isolated hillbilly who just wants to live his own dream, he's always fantastic. But yeah, so tons of reasons to watch this. I strongly recommend it, no matter what genre of horror or comedy you're after. I think this one's just really, really fun and definitely a must watch. Okay, so those were my scarily funny comedy horror recommendations for this week. If you have any recommendations that you would like to share, please comment with those below. Definitely always looking for other movies to watch. If you have any recommendations for themes you'd like to see us cover in the future, absolutely comment with those. Definitely want help with that. As always, thank you so much for joining me. I love putting these lists together, and it's always so much fun to kind of dive into our catalog. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode. Again, thank you for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next week. Bye bye.